The Circle Pro is likely not a case that many of you have heard of before. Rounded edges, thick aluminium panels, and tempered glass, all in a tiny 11-litre form factor. This case is a very low production run case, and that's one reason why it's so expensive, but more on that later. It's very easy to get mesmerized by the ultra clean design on the Circle Pro on the surface. It's when we start building in the case that things start to get a little bit complicated. So I think the one thing that we can all agree on here is that the Circle Pro's design on the exterior is pretty much flawless. Although the name suggests it's not actually a circle, but the height and depth of the case are identical at just under 30 centimeters, bringing the total volume to 11.5 liters. This means that it fits right between the Ghost S1 with a large top hat and the N-Case M1. Those two cases are among the most competitive small form factor cases with exceptional cooling performance, so the Circle Pro really does have a lot to compete against in that regard. The footprint is slightly smaller on the Circle Pro though, and do note that this is the only case in this entire lineup to boast tempered glass side panels. The execution here is really solid as well, thick panels with rounded edges, a blacked out perimeter, a medium tint, and the mounting to the case is entirely magnetic. The magnets are really strong as well and adhere to the case with no problem at all. The plus side there is that it's just not going to fall off the side of the case no matter what you do, but that is also a drawback because to remove them you'll actually need to take off the top or bottom panel first. The rest of the exterior is made up of thick aluminium panels with the top and bottom panels being completely ventilated. The I/O shield and GPU I/O is recessed, which is a nice touch, and the bottom mounted fans also get enough clearance for adequate airflow. The only branding that you'll find here is a slightly recessed circle on the back. Taking a look on the inside of the case, we're working with a side-by-side layout here with your motherboard on one side, your GPU and drive mounting on the other, and your power supply mounted towards the front. Above the motherboard, we have room for up to a 240mm radiator, although the dimensions are very restrictive, more on that later. And for CPU air cooling, we're limited to a clearance of just 45mm, so liquid cooling is always going to be recommended in this case. One big drawback in my opinion when compared to similar sized enclosures is the lack of full-length graphics card support. In the Circle Pro you're limited to a length of 213mm for your graphics card, which leaves the most powerful option to be Zotac's 1080 Ti Mini if you can still find one, or an ITX sized RTX 2070 Mini like the one I'm running here from MSI. Now don't get me wrong, the RTX 2070 is plenty powerful, but if you're spending this much money on a case, you're likely going to go with an RTX 2080 Ti or an RTX Titan. One thing I do love about the Circle Pro though is the toolless 2.5-inch drive mounting. It is completely toolless in every sense of the word. All of the wiring is pre-installed, there's no screws required, all you have to do is slide those 2.5-inch drives in and you're done. By the way, there are 2 slots there, so I do believe that is sufficient. The rest is up to your M.2 storage on your motherboard. Now if you've watched a few of my other case reviews, you'd probably know that this is the part where I say, here's the finished build, everything went to plan, now let's look at the thermals. But the reality is everything did not go to plan, and the Circle Pro is actually really tough to build in. Building in this case requires you to dismantle all of the panels, installing your components on those separate pieces, and then piecing all of the bits together. Assembly here is methodical, tedious, and highly specific. This is a blinding contrast to the majority of other small form factor cases on the market, which just require you to remove the top and side panels to complete your build. I will also mention that although the exterior is truly beautiful, both visually and structurally, the interior construction does leave a little bit to be desired. For example, the spine of the case that the motherboard mounts to is a bit flimsy compared to the Ghost S1 and the Den A4, which are connected from front to back. The other hiccup that I ran into was just how rough the compatibility was for 240mm AIOs. To give you an idea, I have 4 240mm AIOs here for testing and none of them fit. The pump block is too tall on 3 of them, and the Corsair H100i Platinum that does have a shallow enough pump block to fit, the radiator dimensions are just slightly too big. So for testing here, I've used a 120mm AIO, which does actually run quite good. You can install slim 120mm fans at the bottom. There are dust filters pre-installed here for this bottom panel, but I found that I actually had to remove them as they were pressing on the fan blades. Alright, looking at the thermals here, the Circle Pro actually performs pretty good, especially when you consider that it's mostly closed off. Do note that the fan speed though has been set to max for these tests. In this chart, we're looking at CPU thermals for our 9900K, which has a slight overclock, and the 120mm AIO on the Circle Pro is keeping it under control. We do see about a 6-degree drop in thermals when removing the tempered glass side panel though, so there is that slight thermal compromise for the enhanced visuals on the exterior. GPU thermals were surprisingly good too, again, likely due to the 4 fans transferring enough air throughout the case. I was certain that the glass panel was going to choke things, but it seems that this just isn't the case. The Circle Pro is able to match the Skyreach 4 Mini on GPU thermals, although at a much higher noise level due to the 4 fans. Without the fans running at full speed, you can likely expect a few degree increase. Now, the Circle Pro is one of the most expensive cases that I've ever reviewed, coming in at $449 US. For that reason, it makes it pretty much impossible to recommend. Now, the main competitor to this case is the Ghost S1, which is already a very premium expensive case, but at the end of the day, and to be fair, the Ghost S1 is significantly cheaper, it's a bit more compact and offers full-length GPU support, and it can fit the majority of 240mm AIOs on the market with a large top hat. So do keep an eye out for Amazon listings if you do want to get your hands on one of those. There's also the Ncase M1, which is also quite premium at a significantly lower cost, although the aluminium panels just aren't as thick. I will mention that the Ncase M1 seems to be out of stock for the last few months, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. I know the V6 is coming out in September or so, but yeah, it's kind of frustrating that case has been out of stock for so long. So the $449 price tag would be kind of okay to excuse if the case was flawless, but it's not. It has its problems. The building is way too hard in this case, and the compatibility issues really should be stronger when you're looking at the competition. Now, having said all that, if you just have a fat wallet, you've got a ton of money, and you want a small form factor case that's premium, and the really only thing that you care about, or the primary thing that you care about, is design and aesthetics, then this case might be for you, in which case you can check out the links down below. For the rest of my audience who are into small form factor cases, I do recommend something else with better graphics card support and radiator support and a much lower price tag. And for all the guys over at Circle Studio and the people behind this case, there are a lot of great ideas here. I love the toolless drive mounting, and the materials that you've used are seriously next level. I'd love to see this pushed into a new direction with a more focus on performance and hardware compatibility. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the Circle Pro. A huge thanks for watching. Consider subscribing down below if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one.